glowing light on the skin. This is going to be a setup that I use as a go-to when I am looking for those features, when I want the skin to be even, when I want it to be pale, when I want the shadows to be filled in and the eyes to be glowing. This is going to be my go-to setup. And it's actually quite easy and inexpensive to achieve. So let's break down what goes into this Creative Studio lighting setup. First of all, let's talk about our main light. The main light in this situation is going to be the ProPhoto 20-inch white beauty dish. For the way that I'm going to light this, I want it to be centered to my subject. I'm going to, in the end, try to completely reduce or eliminate all of the shadows. So one way I can help myself out by doing this is to center that beauty dish to the subject's face. This is going to minimize the shadows from the left and the right. Let's talk about beauty dish placement. As I look at this setup, usually how I set a beauty dish is I determine the height based on how much shadows I want under the cheekbones and jawline. The higher up I raise that beauty dish, the more shadows under the cheekbones, the more shadows under the jawlines. But at some point, the eyes start to look a little dull. They lose the life and the catch lights in them. So there isn't exactly a correct height. I'm usually somewhere between 6 and 14 inches above the height of the model's eyes with the center of that beauty dish. One key to using a beauty dish, whenever you're using it for any setups, is that you want that center of the beauty dish, the reflective part, to be pointed right at the center of the model's face. This is going to be the most pleasing quality of light. If you catch an edge of the beauty dish, perhaps where my face is here, it's going to create very harsh and directional light on the face. So you always want to make sure that beautiful center and glowing part of the light is centered on the subject's face. So I want to get that set up first. Now for this setup, what I've decided that I want that bright red hair to be rich and glowing, her skin to be pale, creamy, even, smooth, very, very pale. But if I take a shot right now, it's not giving me what I want. The picture is going to look quite flat. There isn't going to be a sparkle to her eyes. The color isn't going to pop from the scene, and her skin is going to look a little bit too dark. So let me show you what it looks like right now with just one light, the beauty dish centered in front of our subject. Beautiful. Beauty dish light by itself can usually be quite beautiful. However, in this instance, it isn't giving me what I need. So what I'm going to do is I am going to simply and easily add reflectors. And you don't need to use expensive reflectors. I'm going to use inexpensive pieces of white foam core. These are just pieces that I bought from a craft shop. And we're going to use this to fill in the shadows and to give her that sparkle to the eyes. Let's talk about a couple things that you would want to consider when buying this foam core. Where we're going to have it placed underneath the subject's chin to catch the light, you would want to make sure that they're not too large. Also, if the foam core is too small, it's not going to catch enough light to fill in the shadows. So the typical normal size is actually just perfect. If you don't have a lot of assistance on set or a really complicated rig to hold reflectors, it's not a problem. Your subject can actually hold the reflectors themselves. The one downside of this is then they have a little bit of restriction to their mobility and to their posing, and they might not be able to use their hands. So this would be a consideration when setting up your reflectors. What this is going to do when I put the reflector underneath her chin is going to catch the light from the beauty dish, bounce off of this white foam core, and fill in all the shadows and give her beautiful catch lights. If I just place one underneath her chin, like this, I'm gonna hold that real quick. This is traditional clamshell lighting. One light above to illuminate her face and a second light below, or a reflector in this case, to fill in the shadows. And this looks nice, but unfortunately for the look that I'm going for, there's still a lot of shadows on either side of her face. And I don't have that completely even, creamy, smooth skin that I'm going for. Let me take a quick shot of this. It still looks good, but it's not quite the creative lighting setup that I want. Then we'll add our second piece of foam core. When you compare those two shots, there is a huge difference. We've really filled in the shadows underneath the subject's chin. We've really made her skin look a lot more even and smooth. And I also see a nice bright catch light in her eyes. It's really drawing a lot more attention. If I thought that reflector was a little bit too filling, I wanted a little bit more jawline, I could simply lower it down a little bit. The further that I pull it away from her chin, the less it will fill in. But in this case, I basically want to eliminate the shadows. I want really even skin, so I'm going to add a second reflector. What I'm going to do is I want to catch every single bit of light that this beauty dish has to offer. So we are going to make a V. We're going to take these two reflectors, put them in a V underneath her chin, and it'll catch all of the light. So let's do that. Thank you very much. Right there, perfect. This beauty dish is now pointed towards her face, but also into this foam core. It's going to catch all of that light, bounce it back in. And not only is it going to even out all of the shadows, basically eliminate them, but it's going to make some incredible catch lights in the eyes. So you'll definitely want to check those out. Now, one way that you might mess up this setup, something to watch out for, is if your beauty dish is pointed in the wrong direction. If the beauty dish is pointed back instead of slightly downward, what will be happening is there won't be any light down here in the foam core itself, so there's nothing to bounce. So just make sure you have that slightly downward angle. Let's take a look at the complete difference now that we've made this V of white foam core. Wow. All right, so looking at this, looking at the catch lights in her eyes, they look like cat eyes. Her eyes are just glowing, and you see both of these reflectors reflected in her eyes. You see those as very large, defined catch lights. And I'm using that as creative studio lighting to make a little bit of a different effect, to do something different. Now, you don't have to shoot this particular lighting setup on any special background. It's whatever you want. I could shoot it on a red background. I could add a gel to make a white background red. I could shoot it on a black background. But in this case, I've decided I want